Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the free Ableton online workshop with me, ElPeche, and with Vox Sound. Today, hopefully everyone can hear me properly. Today, we will be looking a little bit at the Wavetable Synth on Ableton. So I prepared a little project here with basically a little bass of what would be a kind of a housey track. And we're going to be looking into using the Wavetable Synth, which is this guy here. Comes with Ableton. It's really cool. You can get some really cool textures and sounds out of it. So basically, this is what I've got to start with. I'll just play it through so you can have a listen. Basically, so what we've got here, I'll break it down for you so you can understand how this little structure was built, and then we'll jump straight into using Wavetable for a few of these sounds. So over here we've got our kick. It's coming from Kick 2, which is a really cool kick generator plugin by Sonic Academy, and it's written in MIDI. So here's my MIDI clip for that kick. I've created two different ones. This is kind of a breaky one. So when we play this, we should have kind of a breakdown kind of. To then go back into this, which is our four to the floor kind of housey kick. For drums, this was actually made by a student of mine, Rick. He used it in one of his projects, so I kind of borrowed it for this lesson. It's basically a little drum sequence written in MIDI as well, and this is what it sounds like on its own. So basically we've got 4 different hi-hats here. And then little shaker hat as well, couple of shakers, different tones as well. Got a clap going on here, kind of a boxy kind of snare, and a clap, well it's a rim with a lot of reverb, big tail on that, and then nice and solid clap there, and this as well. So when we play it together, obviously they've been also panned a little bit. So when you open up this section of your drum rack, you'll see the submixer of the drum rack here. So they've been panned slightly so that they give us a nice and big drum sound. Now, what I would do with this, and if you've been watching for the past sessions, you've probably seen me do this again. So I'd rename this as full drums, and then just so we've got a couple of more moments, I'd come in here and take away some elements. So we've got more empty kind of, and I'm literally just clicking the line here and zeroing them out. So I'll leave that in. So we should be left with basically just the claps now. So that will give us 2 moments for drums, and then we'll rename this as, I'll put it as less drums for now. We could even do a third one if we want. Again, subtracting some more. And now we've got 3 moments for that. So I'll call this even less. Cool. At this point, I've selected a couple of loops here. They're mainly percussion-based loops to kind of give some filling into the whole drum section. So we've got this guy. It's got quite a bassy side to it as well, which gives the whole track a bit of groove. Then we've got this, which is basically just a top loop, basic house top loop. But I've stripped it down a lot because it is quite a full loop. So if I play it on its own, this is what it would usually sound like. You can see it's quite full and quite cheesy, like housey kind of vibe. So what I've done is I just want a little bit of groove out of this. I don't actually want the whole full sound. So I've set it to warp, beats warping setting. And then I've set this to transients. So it will only play the transients. And then this is the percentage of how much I want it to play. And I've set it right down to 20%. So we end up with a very cut up drum sound. So, and it's literally just giving it a little bit more body if I play it with this. This is my main drums. This is just giving it some more body in the background. And then we go for the full drums. And then my last loop is again just something to give it a little bit more swing. So if I play it, quite basic. So that's basically the drum section. Again, this is MIDI drums, and the loops group is basically just audio loops that I'm using and kind of fiddling around and processing so that they sound different from whatever the original sound was. So that's our drums. For the bass section, I just wrote some really simple bass notes, kind of housey, kind of groove. We're using operator on this one. This is an operator rack that I made the other day. It's basically 2 operator synths with a little bit of a difference in spectrum from each one. So if we play it on its own, so if I take this one out, we end up with the more subby part of it, and then this one is the kind of top, low mids and mids of your sub. The reason I've separated them is just because I want them to sound slightly different. So we've got a sub that's fuller and has more body. I've got two lines for this, two different melody lines for the sub, and that sounds like that. Cool. So that's our kind of core of the track. Now moving on to, so I've separated here 3 channels with Wavetable Synths on them. And I wrote a little lead kind of line that I think could work. So this is what it sounds like at the moment. Hello, sorry guys, had some technical issues here. We're back. So this is what this wavetable sounds like at the moment. So I've used it as kind of a lead sound. So if we play it on its own, these are the notes. Yep. Cool. And the way Wavetable works is basically we've got 2 different oscillator sections. But the main difference between this kind of synth and everything that we've looked at in the past, i.e. analog and operator, is that for each oscillator on this guy here, we can choose between 2 main waves. So here we've got basically what looks a little bit like a squarey kind of wave. And on this side, we've got a kind of a sawtooth kind of wave. And what it does is basically it allows you to change between waves for each oscillator. And this can be controlled via envelopes or LFOs in this section here, which is your modulation section. So this is your oscillator section. You got oscillator 1 and 2. Filter section, 2 filters as well. And then your modulation section. And then here you've got the matrix, which is basically the mapping of your modulators. So at the moment, we've got amp envelope going into oscillator 1 position, which is basically this. So as you can see, this is moving. What's affecting it at the moment is this envelope. So if I change this envelope, you'll see that it moves in a different way. So I could, in theory, apply envelope 2 to, say, for example, the filter, and this is important. So every time I click on something here, it comes up in the matrix, allowing me to then map whatever modulation source to that parameter. So I could map envelope 2 to the frequency cutoff of this filter, and that would be something like that. Yeah. And obviously this is the amount. So the further up I go, this is 100% and minus 100%. So this would do the opposite kind of movement. Because I'm using a low pass filter, if I do the opposite movement, it's going to start from lower down and come further up. And if I do positive movement, it will start from further up and go lower down. Now this can be very, very interesting if you want to create like long progressions. So say this sound here, at the moment we've got an 8 loop. So if I duplicate the size of this and then do that again, I've got a really long loop now. And what I could do is basically map and automate this amount here to my clip. And so if I go into clip automations, you'll see that basically I've got filter 1 frequency here already. So I could have it starting quite low down and then coming up. And basically creating all that movement within a single MIDI clip. So if we listen to this, so let's just go back to Wavetable for a bit. So oscillator section, filter section, modulation section, where we have envelopes and LFOs, and the matrix. And then on this side here, we've also got a unison part, which is basically it will make the sound wider by detuning it slightly. So what you can do is choose the kind of unison you want to use. So if I don't use any, it becomes quite a bland kind of sound in the middle. And then if I apply it, you'll see that it starts opening up. And different sorts of unison will give you different results, basically. So I've chosen the random one, and there we go. I've chosen the random one. I've set it to polyphonic. So if I set it to mono, it basically won't unison anything because you're working with one single voice. So this is polyphonic, and then the amount of voices in your unison is down here. And then obviously the amount of detuning. This is also something that could be quite interesting to map to your MIDI clip. So you've now got it here, unison amount. It's the last thing I was messing around with. And yeah, so that would be kind of a lead sound using Wavetable. Hopefully you guys have been able to understand a little bit about how this works by now, but we are going to do a couple more sounds with it. So let's go. Basically, there's this other little effect that I like to use a lot called trigger gate. And what it does is it acts as a gate, a sound gate, basically, but a sequenced one. So basically, each of these steps is a sound gate that opens and closes. So the ones that are lit, they are open. The ones that are not are closed. And then this also has some quite cool effects on it, such as delay and echo and reverb. So yeah, let's just see what it sounds like coming through this. And well, I think you can get the gist of how it works. Basically, this is quite a little annoying plugin. So what I like to do when I'm using it is just to resample whatever comes out of it and use it as audio, because it does get a bit laggy. So the way to do that would be just creating a separate audio channel here. We can call that lead resample. And then we route the audio from lead to this channel, select monitoring to auto, arm the channel, and basically record the audio in. And there we go. We recorded the whole loop. Now, I am going to get rid of this guy because it does make everything a bit more laggy. So now I've got my lead on the Wavetable Synth channel, and then the lead resample in audio over here. Could be good to maybe group these, because then I don't think we're going to be playing them at the same time. So if we call that lead group, and just leave them one underneath the other, because then if you close a group, you play either one or the other. And there we go. So moving forward, let's say we wanted to have some chords going on with this track. So I've written down some really simple triad chords here that would go in the key. And let's have a listen to what they sound like at the moment. Oops, missing one there. Cool, so very simple chords. This is, what we've got here is just a sine wave. It's basically the default setting for Wavetable. I haven't done anything to this yet. So, going back to the oscillator section, basically here is where I choose the type of wavetable that I want for this oscillator. So we've got basic ones, which are basically just the basic shapes. So saw, sync additive, which I think is what we're using in the other one. And then basically, if you go on to more complex waves, you've got loads of different ones here. So if you go into complex, you start seeing things like this. And you've got literally loads and loads and loads of combinations to choose from. This is basically the heart of Wavetable Synth, the ability to choose between so many different combinations of waves and to then modulate the way that this changes whilst you're playing the sound. This is basically the heart of wavetable synthesis. So the richness of the sounds that you can get out of this is insane. I think I'll go with this one for now. And again, if we were to map this to our MIDI clip, you could have quite a long, because this is already quite a long clip, so quite a long evolution and progression of the type of wave that we're using. So let's say we wanted to do that, and again, we could start off quite soft like that, and this is where you change the percentage of each wave that you're choosing to use. So we'll start off like that, and then if we come over here, we'll see that we've now got oscillator 1 wave position. And say you wanted to change between that and the other extreme, which is this one, you could create different clips for that. So if I then copy and paste this clip, the first one over here, and then set it to the kind of opposite movement, it would be starting from here. And that's only one parameter that we're using at the moment. So let's get some mappings done here as well and some filtering. Also on this section here on the left, you've got the sub oscillator, which basically just creates a subharmonic for the whole thing. So the fullness of the sound that you can get out of Wavetable is really, really cool. I mean, you can get sounds that cover literally the whole spectrum. And we can see that quite easily if we apply just a simple EQ or spectrum over here. Yeah, so if we open that up, so if I turn this off, I've got my main sound coming in here. This tail here is basically just noise, but the minute I turn this on, I've got a subharmonic coming in right here. And I can control how many octaves down this is through this octave thing here. And I go with -1. So I'm going to put a little bit of low pass filtering here, and let's see what we can do in terms of modulation. So let's go with an LFO for this. If you go LFO 1, and the way that LFO works is pretty much the same as any other LFOs that you'll find on other synths in live. You've got the waveform for the LFO here. So sine, triangle, saw, square, and irregular. Let's go with maybe triangle. And the rate down here, the amount, so the amount of the wave itself, and then there's a shaper as well. So this can become a sawtooth. Let's go with that. And I think we could map this to, let's say, so I've now mapped it to the resonance of filter 1. Something else I'd probably do is apply the second filter here and cut off all this sub that's coming from it. And I could do that with an EQ as well, because I don't really want sub coming from this. Hello, sorry, technical problems. And that's pretty much it, I think, for this sound. Again, we could use some unison. we've got lead and some chords. I think maybe a sound that we could add here that could complement it quite a bit would be something something of an arp, so something arpeggiated. At the moment we're using, so this is more of a leady kind of sound. With arpeggios, you might want to use shorter sounds so that you get space between the notes. So let's say we grab our lead sound from here and copy it to this channel. On this channel, we've basically got the same chords. So what I'm going to do is to make the chords longer, just by selecting all the notes and then holding Shift and the arrow, I'll make them long so that there's no spaces between them. And then we can throw an arpeggio on the channel just before the synth. And that would sound something like this. Now, on the arpeggio, we've got a few controls that are quite important. So this is the rate. What it's doing is basically it's jumping between the notes of these chords in a given sequence or order. So I can control that. So this is the kind of style or order of it. And I go with down. And then here you've got the gate, which is basically the size of the note, so the length of each note. I go with shorter notes. And then here you've got the steps, which is basically the number of octaves that it works in. So currently it's working in 1 octave, and then here it's going to go to 2. And I go with 1. And then on over here you can transpose your notes as well. So if you want it to be like from a major scale to a minor scale, which isn't the case. And we can also set velocity to these notes. So velocity is basically the strength, the force of each note. And we can set a target velocity. So because we're using quite short notes, it's not going to make a lot of a difference. So I'm not even going to go into that. So let's change this sound up a bit so it's not exactly the same as our lead. What I was thinking here is maybe a kind of mallet-y kind of sound, almost a little bit percussive, but with tone to it. So the way we would go about that is basically by adjusting our envelopes to make the notes really short. And immediately we've got the kind of plucky kind of sound. Might use another wave as well. And might use the second filter a little bit as well. So let's see what that sounds like. And what tends to be quite a cool idea as well with arpeggios is to take away some of the notes at a given point. So you create kind of a variation. Be cool to have these notes here. We could maybe just close this loop here. Once you then apply maybe some effects to it, what I'm doing is I'm just opening up the send to delay, so it's going to be affected slightly by this delay on send B. Might be a good idea to make these notes, yeah. There we go. So I think that's pretty much it for Wavetable. Hopefully you've been able to understand and grasp a little bit of how it works. The last thing here that I'm using is just a berimbau sample. And it's basically just a loop. And I've created a second channel here with the same loop, but with a 7th semitone detune upwards. And then what I've done is I've applied the Raz effect, which is basically a simple delay with from 10 to 30 milliseconds delay on one side, so it's panned to the right here, and then the left doesn't have that effect. So the way that works, basically by opening up, so by applying a little bit of delay to one of the sides, you open up the stereo image of that sound, so it becomes like this big in your mix. So I'll just, if I turn it off, look, it comes straight back to the middle, mono. And when I apply this, I've got it very wide on the stereo. And then with this one, which is the original sample, on mono, it sounds pretty full. So that's the original one. And then Everyone could kind of get a little bit about Wavetable today. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next week. If you have any questions, please message me. And yeah, thanks for watching.